Everyone, and welcome to this carrier update presented by PowerFleet. So, tender rejection rates year over year. We've got this green line here. That is last year's tender rejection rate, 8.42% this time last year. Right now we're sitting about 7.57% overall tender rejection rate in the country right now. What this indicates to me is that we are actually seeing a convergence of these tender rejections year over year. Last year we were falling out of that heavy 2018, super hot market. Now we're starting to kind of level out as we enter the middle of January, which is not necessarily that expected. Capacity is tightening in certain parts of the country, not everywhere in general, and this does not mean that the spot market is blowing up with freight by any means. But this is an interesting development as we enter the middle of January, which is traditionally one of the softest times for the freight market. So let's check out and see where in the country we can expect some of this tightness to exist. So up here around the Detroit area, Boston, Massachusetts, this is not a big market, and you certainly don't want to just head into Boston blindly without a load already pre-planned, but you should see a little bit more opportunity here versus this time last week. So what this is doing is measuring weighted tender rejections overall in the country. So it's going to take into account market share and tender rejection weekly change. So anything in blue, we're going to see decreasing capacity week over week. Anything in red, loosening capacity week over week. So we've got some dark red in these bigger markets here around Harrisburg, etc., Columbus, Grand Rapids, down here around Atlanta market. Some of the bigger markets themselves are very loose, and they are continuing to get looser. What you need to pay attention for, however, are these blue markets right in here. So around here in North Carolina, Charlotte. Again, does not mean that there's going to be blowing up spot market activity in these areas, but it does mean that week over week we are seeing a transition to a tighter market than we saw last week. And overall, these darker blues are going to be weighted against the overall country. So that means that these are going to be the tightest areas of the country. Again, not necessarily saying that there's going to be explosive spot market activity and you're going to see 20% margins overnight, but it means that you are going to be able to use this information to probably source your loads a little bit more effectively in terms of week over week activity. So looking at the list here of the weighted rejection index, I should say, you see the Charlotte market is number one today, along with down here Ontario and Los Angeles, California. So Ontario, the second biggest market in the country, seeing an increase in weighted tender rejection rates. So this is very important stuff to look at in terms of if you're trying to manage your fleet and you're definitely, week over week activity, you can accept more freight going into these markets. So looking at the Charlotte market here, this is the tender rejection rate for van, reefer, and just basic tender rejection. So contrary to the rest of the country, it's really starting to pick back up in the Charlotte market. Reefer rejections spiking all the way up to 19.87% yesterday. Van rejection rates are increasing as well, down there at 10.14%. So that means you are going to see a little bit more increasing opportunity out of the Charlotte market here in the last 7 days or so. But more importantly, let's look at the Los Angeles and Ontario markets. So reefer rejection rates, not doing a lot out of Los Angeles. Not the time of year yet. We need to wait a couple of months so far. But van rejection rates starting to inch up. This is important to note as we have Chinese New Year hitting here in a little bit, so the port activity is bound to increase here shortly. Overall, mid-haul rejection rates and tweener rejection rates, some of the tightest lengths of haul in that area are right now today. So if you are a carrier looking for freight out of Los Angeles, you should have increasing opportunity out of that. Again, your margins may not be getting over 10% or so, or 5% even, but certainly be aware that this does exist for increasing opportunities for utilization. And that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.